Jake Carter wiped the grease from his hands and looked at the empty docking bay with a tired sigh. Another slow day at the repair station meant another day of barely scraping by. His small workshop sat on the edge of human space, near a frontier world called New Haven. Most ships passed by without stopping, heading to the bigger stations with fancier equipment and better reputations. Jake didn't mind the quiet too much, but his bank account certainly did. The station was small, just 3 docking bays and a workshop that had seen better days. Jake had bought it cheap 5 years ago, hoping to make a decent living fixing ships for colonists and traders. Reality had been harder than he expected. The big corporate stations got most of the business, leaving scraps for independents like him. He was about to close up for the night when his sensors blinked. A ship was approaching, and from the readings it was in bad shape. Jake straightened up, watching his monitor as the vessel limped closer. The design was unlike anything he'd seen from human manufacturers. Sleek and elegant, but currently trailing sparks and venting atmosphere from several points along its hull. The comm system crackled to life. A voice came through speaking accented but clear English. "This is Valerian transport ship requesting emergency docking. Our engines are failing. Do you have space?" Jake hit the response button. "Yeah, I've got room. Bay 2 is open. Come in slow and easy." He watched as the damaged ship crawled into his docking bay, landing with a heavy thud that made him wince. That was going to need some structural work too. As the ship settled and the bay pressurized, Jake grabbed his toolkit and headed out to meet his unexpected customers. The airlock opened, and 3 figures emerged. Jake stopped in his tracks. They were humanoid but definitely not human, tall and graceful, with skin that seemed to shimmer with a faint purple tint under the bay lights. Their eyes were larger than human eyes, colored in shades of silver and gold. They wore fitted uniforms that looked both practical and expensive. The one in front stepped forward, her posture radiating authority despite the obvious stress of their situation. Her silver hair was pulled back in a complex braid, and her golden eyes studied Jake with an expression that seemed both desperate and doubtful. "I am Captain Lyria of the Valerian Consortium," she said, her tone formal. "Our ship has suffered a critical malfunction. We need repairs immediately." Jake nodded, trying not to stare. "Jake Carter. I own this station. Let me take a look and see what we're dealing with." The second alien woman stepped forward. She was slightly shorter, with copper-colored markings along her neck and arms. "I am Senna, the ship's engineer. Our quantum flux drive experienced a cascade failure during our last jump. Multiple systems are damaged." Her tone suggested she didn't think a human mechanic in a small frontier station would understand what she was talking about. The third woman, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "I'm Kira, the pilot. We barely made it here. The navigation systems were failing too." She seemed younger than the others, her expression more openly worried. Jake grabbed his diagnostic scanner and approached their ship. "Mind if I take a look inside?" Lyria exchanged glances with her companions. There was clear hesitation in her expression. "I suppose we have no choice. But I must warn you, our technology is quite advanced. It's unlikely that—" She trailed off as if trying to find a polite way to say what she was thinking. "That a human can fix it?" Jake finished for her with a slight smile. "Let's just see what the problem is first." The interior of the Valerian ship was impressive. Clean lines, elegant design, and technology that hummed with barely contained power. Or at least it should have been humming. Right now, several panels were dark, and Jake could smell the burnt ozone scent of fried circuits. He made his way to the engine room, aware of the 3 aliens following close behind. The quantum flux drive was a beautiful piece of engineering, even in its damaged state. Jake had seen similar designs before back in his previous life, but the Valerians had refined it to an art form. He pulled out his scanner and began running diagnostics, his practiced eyes taking in every detail. Senna watched him work, her arms crossed. The primary flux regulator failed, which caused a feedback loop through the secondary systems. "We've lost containment in the quantum chamber, and several relay nodes are completely fused." Jake nodded absently, pulling up the scan results on his tablet. "Yeah, I see that. But the real problem is here." He pointed to a section of the drive that looked intact. "This junction point has a microfracture. It's been there for a while, probably from a previous repair. It finally gave way under stress, and that's what triggered the cascade." The 3 Valerian women stared at him. Lyria's expression shifted from doubtful to surprised. "How could you possibly see that?" Our own diagnostic systems didn't detect it. Your systems were looking for obvious damage, Jake explained, zooming in on the scan. This fracture is inside the junction housing. You'd need to know it was there to find it. I've seen this kind of failure before. Senna moved closer, studying the scan with new interest. You're right. I can see it now. But how do you know about quantum flux drive failures? This is Valyrian technology. Jake shrugged, not wanting to get into his past. I've worked on a lot of different systems over the years. Alien tech isn't that different from human tech once you understand the principles. Lyria's formal demeanor softened slightly. Can you repair it? Jake walked around the drive, taking measurements and notes. It's not going to be easy. I'll need to fabricate some replacement parts, and I'll have to adapt some of my components to work with your systems. But yeah, I can fix it. Give me 3 days, maybe 4. Kira's eyes widened. 3 days? Our own shipyards estimated at least 2 weeks for this kind of damage. Well, they'd be doing it by the book with all the proper protocols and paperwork, Jake said. I'm more of an improvise-as-I-go kind of mechanic. Gets the job done faster, and the repairs hold just as well. Lyria seemed torn between hope and skepticism. What will this cost? Jake calculated quickly in his head. Parts, labor, the complexity of working with alien systems. He named a price that was fair, but would actually let him pay his bills for the next few months. The 3 Valyrians exchanged glances again, and Jake got the distinct impression they were communicating somehow without words. Finally, Lyria nodded. Very well. We accept your terms. But I must be honest with you, Jake Carter. We are not accustomed to relying on other species for such critical work. If you cannot complete the repairs or if there are complications, then you don't pay me, Jake said simply. I don't charge for work I can't finish. Now, do you ladies need accommodations while I work? The station has a few guest quarters. They're not fancy, but they're clean. Senna looked like she wanted to protest, probably wanting to supervise every moment of the repair, but Lyria placed a hand on her arm. We would appreciate that. Thank you. As Jake showed them to the guest quarters, he could feel their eyes on him, still evaluating, still doubting. They were clearly used to being the most advanced species in the room, used to their technology being beyond what others could understand. Finding a human mechanic on a backwater station who could diagnose their problems in minutes had shaken their assumptions. Jake didn't mind their doubt. He'd prove himself through his work, the way he always had. As he headed back to the workshop to begin fabricating the parts he'd need, he found himself looking forward to the challenge. It had been too long since he'd worked on something this interesting. Behind him, in the guest quarters, Lyria stood at the window looking out at the stars. Do you think he can really do it? Kira asked quietly. Senna was reviewing the diagnostic scans Jake had shared with them. His analysis was perfect. He saw things I missed. If he can actually repair it? She shook her head in wonder. Lyria's expression was thoughtful. Perhaps we have underestimated humans. This Jake Carter is no ordinary mechanic. Then let's hope his skills match his confidence, Kira said. We need to complete our mission. In the workshop, Jake was already at work, his hands moving with practiced precision as he began the repairs that would change all their lives in ways none of them could imagine. The next morning, Jake was already deep into the repair work when Senna appeared in the workshop. She'd clearly been awake for hours, her expression alert and curious as she watched him work on the fabrication equipment. Jake glanced up and nodded a greeting before returning his attention to the delicate component taking shape under his hands. You're creating a replacement flux regulator, Senna observed, moving closer. But that design is different from our standard specifications. Jake wiped sweat from his forehead. The fabricator was running hot, pushing its limits to create parts it wasn't really designed for. Your standard design is good, but it has a weak point in the thermal distribution. I'm reinforcing that area. It'll last longer and handle stress better. Senna's expression shifted from polite interest to genuine fascination. She pulled up a holographic display from her wrist device, comparing Jake's design to the Valyrian standard. You're right. We've had recurring issues with thermal stress in those exact areas. How did you know? It's a common problem in high-energy systems, Jake explained, carefully adjusting the fabricator's settings. Different species solve it different ways, but the physics are the same everywhere. Heat needs somewhere to go, or it builds up and causes failures. For the next hour, Senna watched Jake work, asking questions that grew increasingly technical. Jake found himself enjoying the conversation. It had been years since he'd talked shop with another engineer who could keep up with him. Most of his customers just wanted their ships fixed and didn't care about the details. Lyria appeared around midday, bringing food from the station's small cafeteria. She paused in the doorway, surprised to see Senna sitting at Jake's workbench. Both of them bent over a schematic and debating the merits of different power routing approaches. "I brought lunch," Lyria announced, amusement evident in her voice. "Senna, I thought you were going to supervise the repairs, not become his assistant." Senna looked up, slightly embarrassed. "He's showing me a new approach to quantum containment. It's actually quite brilliant." Jake accepted the food gratefully. "She's been helpful. Explaining some of the quirks of your systems saves me time figuring them out through trial and error." They ate together in the workshop, and Jake noticed how the formality from yesterday had faded somewhat. Lyria asked about his station, how long he'd been here, what brought him to the frontier. Jake kept his answers vague, not wanting to talk about his past with the military. That life was behind him. Kira joined them in the afternoon, curious about what had captured Senna's attention so completely. She watched Jake install the new flux regulator into the quantum drive, his movements careful and precise. The part slid into place with a satisfying click, and Jake began connecting the various power conduits and control systems. "You work very differently than our engineers," Kira observed. "They follow strict procedures, checking and rechecking every connection against specifications." Jake grunted as he reached a difficult connection point. "Procedures are good for routine work, but when you're improvising repairs with parts that aren't exactly standard, you need to trust your instincts and experience. I test as I go, make sure each connection works before moving to the next." "Is that how all humans work?" Kira asked. Jake laughed. "No, plenty of humans are just as by the book as your engineers. But I learned my trade in situations where by the book wasn't always an option. You adapt or you fail." Over the next 2 days, the Valyrian women became regular fixtures in Jake's workshop. Senna was there most often, fascinated by his methods and eager to learn. Jake found himself teaching her tricks he'd picked up over the years, shortcuts and techniques that no manual would ever include. She was a quick learner, and her knowledge of Valyrian systems helped Jake avoid several potential mistakes. Lyria spent her time managing communications with her superiors, but she checked on the progress regularly. Jake could sense the stress she was under, the pressure to complete whatever mission had brought them to this region of space. She never shared the details, and Jake didn't ask. It wasn't his business. Kira proved to be surprisingly handy with mechanical work. When Jake needed an extra set of hands to hold components in place while he secured them, she volunteered. Her pilot's understanding of how systems worked together gave her an intuitive grasp of what Jake was trying to accomplish. On the third day, Jake tackled the most challenging part of the repair. The quantum chamber itself needed to be resealed and recalibrated. This was delicate work requiring absolute precision. One mistake could cause another cascade failure or worse, a containment breach that would destroy the ship and probably take out half his station. All 3 Valyrians gathered to watch, the tension palpable. Jake took his time, double-checking every measurement, every connection. He could feel their eyes on him, the weight of their hopes and doubts. His hands remained steady as he made the final adjustments. "All right," Jake said, stepping back. Moment of truth. "Senna, want to do the honors?" Senna moved to the control panel, her fingers hovering over the activation sequence. She looked at Jake, who nodded encouragement. She initiated the startup sequence. The quantum drive hummed to life, its characteristic thrumming sound filling the engine room. Displays lit up green across the board. The containment field stabilized, holding steady and strong. Jake watched the readings carefully, looking for any signs of problems. Everything looked perfect, but Jake wasn't done yet. "Now we test it under load," he said, making adjustments to his monitoring equipment. "I'm going to push it through the full operational range, make sure everything holds." For the next hour, Jake ran the drive through every test he could think of. He pushed it hard, harder than normal startup procedures would dictate. The Valyrians watched nervously as the power levels climbed, but Jake remained calm and focused. Every system responded exactly as it should. Finally, Jake shut down the drive and reviewed all the data. A smile crossed his face. "She's good. Better than good, actually. Your drive is running about 8% more efficiently than your baseline specs indicate it should." Senna was staring at her own readings in disbelief. "That's impossible. How?" Jake pulled up a schematic. See this cooling loop I integrated? It's based on a human design for managing waste heat in fusion reactors. It keeps the quantum chamber at a more stable temperature, which means less energy lost to thermal management. Your drive doesn't have to work as hard to maintain containment. Lyria moved forward, studying the data herself. You didn't just repair our ship. You improved it? Well, I had to fabricate new parts anyway, Jake said with a shrug. Figured I might as well make them better than the originals while I was at it. Kira laughed, the sound bright and surprised. Our shipyards would never have done something like that. They would have restored it to factory specifications exactly. No variations allowed. That's the difference between following rules and solving problems, Jake said. Rules are important, don't get me wrong. But sometimes innovation means breaking a few of them. The three Valyrians looked at each other, and again Jake sensed that silent communication passing between them. When Lyria turned back to him, her expression had changed completely. The doubt and superiority from that first night were gone, replaced by genuine respect. Jake Carter, you have exceeded every expectation we had, Lyria said formally. You have demonstrated skills that rival our best engineers, using equipment that is far inferior to what they have available. You have saved our mission and quite possibly our careers. Jake felt uncomfortable with the praise. I just did the job you hired me for. No, Senna said firmly. You did far more than that. You showed me new approaches I would never have considered. You've changed how I think about engineering. Kira nodded in agreement. When we arrived, we thought we were desperate, forced to rely on a human in a primitive station. We were wrong. You're not just a good mechanic, Jake, you're exceptional. Jake cleared his throat, embarrassed. Well, I appreciate that. Now about the payment. Lyria held up a hand. Before we discuss payment, I need to make you an offer. What you've done here cannot be simply compensated with money. In our culture, a debt like this requires more. Jake felt a flutter of concern. What kind of more? Come with us to Valyria Prime, Lyria said. Let us present you to the Consortium Council. Let them see what you can do. The Council needs to know that humans are more capable than they believe. Jake hesitated. I don't know. I've got a station to run and I'm not much for politics. The Council will offer you contracts, Senna added. Work that pays 10 times what you make here. Access to technology and resources you can't get on the frontier. And beyond that, Kira said quietly, you've given us something precious. You've shown us that our assumptions about other species were wrong. That's worth more than any repair. Please let us return the favor by opening doors for you. Jake looked at the three of them, seeing the sincerity in their expressions. They weren't just offering him opportunity. They were offering friendship, respect, and a chance to be part of something bigger than his small station on the edge of nowhere. All right, he said finally. I'll go, but I'm not making any promises beyond that. The relief and joy on their faces made him smile despite his nervousness about what he was agreeing to. As they began planning for the journey Jake stood in the cargo bay of his station, watching as his essential tools and equipment were loaded onto the Valyrian ship. He'd closed the station temporarily, setting the automated systems to handle basic functions while he was gone. Part of him still couldn't believe he'd agreed to this trip. Lyria approached, holding a data tablet. I've transferred the payment for the repairs to your account. You'll find it's somewhat more than we originally agreed upon. Jake checked his account and his eyes widened. The amount was 3 times what he'd quoted. This is too much. It's exactly right, Lyria said firmly. You completed the work in half the estimated time, and the quality exceeds anything we could have hoped for. In our culture, exceptional work deserves exceptional compensation. Jake wanted to argue, but the number in his account would cover his station's operating costs for over a year. It would let him upgrade equipment, maybe even expand. Thank you. I appreciate it. Don't thank me yet, Lyria said with a slight smile. The journey to Valyria Prime takes 5 days. During that time, we need to prepare you for what's coming. The Consortium Council is not easily impressed, and many of them view humans as primitive newcomers to space travel. Primitive, Jake repeated. That's the second time you've mentioned something like that. Why do your people see humans that way? Lyria gestured for him to follow her aboard the ship. As they walked through the corridors, now fully powered and functioning perfectly, she explained. The Valyrian Consortium has been spacefaring for over 3,000 years. We've developed technologies and social structures that most species haven't achieved. When we encountered humanity 70 years ago, You had barely left your own solar system. From our perspective, you're children playing with tools you don't fully understand. Jake felt a spark of annoyance but kept his voice level. And yet this child just fixed your advanced ship with primitive tools. Exactly, Lyria said, stopping to face him. That's why you're coming with us. You've challenged our assumptions, but you need to understand what you're walking into. Many council members won't want to believe a human could match Valyrian engineering. They'll look for reasons to dismiss or discredit you. They reached the common area where Senna and Kira were waiting. The ship's interior was comfortable, designed for long journeys. The furniture adapted to different body types, and the lighting could be adjusted to match different species' preferences. Senna had spread out various schematics and technical documents on the table. We need to coach you on Valyrian technical terminology and social protocols. The council will test you and you need to be ready. For the next several hours, the three women walked Jake through the intricacies of Valyrian society. He learned about their complex hierarchy based on skill and achievement, rather than birth or wealth. He learned their formal greeting customs and the proper way to address council members. Most importantly, he learned about their engineering philosophy. We value precision and adherence to established principles, Senna explained. Innovation is respected, but it must be proven through rigorous testing and peer review. Your approach, improvising and adapting on the fly, will seem reckless to many Valyrians. But it works, Jake protested. We know that, Kira said. We've seen it. But you'll need to demonstrate it in a way that satisfies their standards. As the ship jumped to faster-than-light travel, Jake felt the subtle shift in the quantum drive he'd repaired. It was smooth, almost imperceptible. He found himself smiling, proud of his work. The journey fell into a comfortable rhythm. Jake spent mornings studying with Senna, learning the technical language he'd need. Afternoons were spent with Lyria, practicing formal presentations and learning to navigate Valyrian social complexity. Evenings, he often found himself with Kira in the ship's observation deck, watching the stars stream past. On the second day, Kira opened up about her own struggles within Valyrian society. I've always been curious about other species, she admitted, but it's seen as a weakness by some. They think I should focus on perfecting Valyrian ways rather than being interested in outsiders. That sounds lonely, Jake said. Kira nodded. It is. When our ship broke down and we had to seek help from a human, part of me was excited. Finally, a chance to interact with someone different, but I had to hide that excitement behind doubt and professionalism. And now? Now I'm glad we met you, Kira said with a genuine smile. You're not what I expected. You're skilled and confident, but not arrogant. You listen and learn. Those are qualities we Valyrians claim to value, but sometimes we forget to practice them. On the third day, Senna shared her own frustrations with Valyrian engineering culture. They were in the engine room, where Senna had asked Jake to explain some of his improvisation techniques in detail. Our engineering has become too rigid, Senna said as Jake demonstrated a connection method he'd developed. We have procedures for everything, and deviating from them is discouraged. Young engineers are taught to follow the established methods, not to question or innovate. But you're questioning now, Jake pointed out. Because you showed me there's another way, Senna said. Watching you work, seeing how you approach problems from different angles, it's opened my mind. I want to bring some of that flexibility back to Valyrian engineering, but it won't be easy. Many of my colleagues will resist. Jake understood her dilemma. He'd faced similar resistance in his own past, part of why he'd ended up on the frontier. Change always meets resistance. But if you can show results, prove that different methods work, eventually people have to listen. I hope you're right, Senna said. That's part of why your demonstration for the council is so important. It's not just about you, it's about opening minds to new possibilities. On the fourth day, Lyria invited Jake to dine privately with her. The meal was a Valyrian specialty, flavors that were unusual but not unpleasant to Jake's human palate. They talked about leadership and responsibility. I'm under enormous pressure from my family, Lyria confessed. They're prominent in the consortium, and they expect me to uphold their reputation. When our ship failed, it wasn't just a mechanical problem. It was a potential embarrassment, a sign of poor planning or weak leadership. But it was just bad luck, Jake said. That microfracture could have happened to anyone. Logic doesn't always matter in politics, Lyria replied. What matters is perception. If I had returned with a ship barely functional, towed by another vessel, it would have damaged my standing. But because you not only fixed it but improved it, I can present this as a success. We discovered a talented engineer, initiated first contact protocols, and returned with a ship performing better than ever. Jake hadn't considered the political implications. So bringing me to the council helps you personally? Yes, Lyria admitted. But it's not just self-interest. I genuinely believe the council needs to see what you can do. We've been isolated for too long, convinced of our superiority. Meeting you has changed my perspective. I want that for my people too. The honesty touched Jake. These three aliens had become more than just customers or traveling companions. They'd become friends, and they were trusting him with their hopes and careers. On the fifth and final day of the journey, the ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel near Valeria Prime. Jake stood at the observation window and gasped at what he saw. The Valerian homeworld was surrounded by massive orbital structures, city ships that dwarfed anything humans had built. Each structure was a work of art and engineering, graceful curves and soaring towers that seemed to defy physics. It's beautiful, Jake breathed. It's home, Kira said, standing beside him. And after this journey, I see it differently. I used to think it represented the pinnacle of civilization. Now I wonder if we've become too comfortable here, too certain of our superiority. As the ship approached one of the orbital cities, Jake felt nervousness building in his stomach. Everything was about to become very real. He was going to stand before the ruling council of one of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations and prove that humanity deserved respect. Senna joined them at the window. The council chamber is in that structure ahead. We'll dock and then you'll have a few hours to rest before the presentation. I don't think I'll be able to rest, Jake admitted. Lyria's voice came from behind them. Then we'll use that time to go over everything once more. You're ready, Jake. You just need to trust yourself the way we trust you. The ship glided into the docking bay, and Jake took a deep breath. He'd fixed their ship against the odds. He'd earned their respect through his skills and character. Now he just had to do it again in front of an audience that would be looking for any reason to doubt him. As the airlock sealed and the docking clamps engaged, Jake squared his shoulders. He'd come too far to back down now. Whatever happened in the council chamber, he'd face it the same way he faced every challenge in his life, with confidence, skill, and the determination to prove that humans belonged among the stars just as much as any other species. The three Valerian women stood with him, and their presence gave him strength. He wasn't facing this alone. They believed in him and he wouldn't let them down. The impossible repair had been just the beginning. Now came the real test. The council chamber was enormous, with curved walls that seemed to glow with their own light. Rows of seats rose in a semicircle, filled with Valerian officials and engineers. At the center sat the High Arbiter, a tall woman named Vessa whose silver eyes held no warmth as they fixed on Jake. He stood in the presentation area, feeling very small and very human under the scrutiny of hundreds of advanced aliens. Lyria stood to his right, formally dressed in ceremonial robes that marked her rank and family status. She'd coached Jake on what to expect, but the reality was more intimidating than he'd imagined. The chamber buzzed with quiet conversations in the Valerian language, and Jake caught enough words to know many were skeptical about his presence. High Arbiter Vessa raised a hand, and silence fell immediately. Her voice carried effortlessly through the chamber. Captain Lyria, you have brought before us a human. You claim he repaired your ship's quantum flux drive using primitive equipment and improved its performance beyond factory specifications. These are extraordinary claims. They are facts, High Arbiter, Lyria responded. I have submitted complete documentation of the repair work, including diagnostic scans before and after, as well as performance data from our journey here. The evidence is conclusive. An older Valerian engineer stood from his seat. Evidence can be falsified or misinterpreted. I do not doubt your ship was repaired, Captain. I doubt a human performed the work to the standard you claim. Jake felt anger flash through him but kept his expression neutral. Senna had warned him this would happen. The council needed to maintain their belief in Valerian superiority, which meant finding ways to dismiss human capabilities. Vessa nodded slowly. Council Engineer Draven raises valid concerns. Captain Lyria, while we respect your report, we require more substantial proof. Your human engineer must demonstrate his abilities here, before witnesses who cannot be accused of bias. This was the moment they'd been preparing for. Jake had known it was coming, but his heart still raced as Vesa gestured to a platform being wheeled into the chamber. On it sat a complex piece of machinery, its casing marked with warning symbols. "This is a prototype power core," Vesa explained. "It was damaged during testing and has defeated the efforts of 3 separate engineering teams. We present it to your human as a test. If he can repair it using only the tools we provide within the time limit we set, then perhaps there is merit to your claims." Jake studied the power core from a distance. Even without detailed scans, he could see scorch marks and warped housing that suggested serious internal damage. This wasn't just a broken part. This was something that had catastrophically failed. Lyria leaned close and whispered, "This is a trap. They've given you something they know is nearly impossible to fix. You don't have to accept this challenge." Jake looked at her, then at Senna and Kira in the audience. They'd put their reputations on the line for him. Backing down now would humiliate them and confirm every prejudice the council held about humans. "I'll do it," Jake said clearly. "What's the time limit?" Vesa's expression didn't change. 4 hours. You may use any tools from our standard engineering kit, but no personal equipment. You may not consult with others during the repair attempt. Begin when ready." Jake approached the power core as technicians set up a workstation nearby. The toolkit they provided was comprehensive but unfamiliar. Valyrian tools operated on different principles than human equipment. He'd have to adapt quickly. The first hour was spent simply assessing the damage. Jake carefully opened the core's housing, aware that hundreds of eyes watched his every move. The internal components were worse than he'd expected. Multiple systems had melted together, creating a tangled mess of fused circuitry and warped conduits. No wonder several teams had failed. This would require completely disassembling major sections and essentially rebuilding them. Jake heard murmurs from the audience. They thought he was moving too slowly, wasting time. But Jake knew rushing would only lead to mistakes. He needed to understand the full scope of the problem before attempting any repairs. By the end of the second hour, Jake had mapped out a strategy. The core's failure had started in a single junction point, then cascaded outward. Like with Lyria's ship, the obvious damage was hiding the real problem. If he just repaired what was visible, the core would fail again as soon as it powered up. He began the delicate work of separating fused components. The Valyrian tools were precise once he figured out their operation, but they were designed for standard procedures. Jake found himself adapting them, using tools in ways they weren't intended for. He could sense the engineers in the audience becoming agitated as he deviated from proper technique. Draven, the engineer who'd questioned him earlier, stood again. "High Arbiter, the human is misusing the tools. He's not following any established repair protocol. This is exactly the kind of reckless behavior we feared." Jake didn't look up from his work. "That's because your established protocols don't work for this situation. You've tried them 3 times already. Want to make it 4, or do you want your core fixed?" The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Valyrians did not speak to council members that way, especially not outsiders. Vesa's eyes narrowed dangerously. Lyria stepped forward quickly. "High Arbiter, I apologize for the humans' directness. He meant no disrespect. It's simply their cultural norm to speak plainly." Jake realized he'd made a mistake, but it was too late to take it back. He focused harder on his work, knowing he'd have to let his results speak for him now. Words had failed. The third hour was the most challenging. Jake had to reroute power connections through secondary pathways, essentially redesigning how the core distributed energy. This was where his improvisational skills mattered most. The Valyrian engineers had tried to restore the original design, but Jake could see that design had fundamental flaws. The prototype had failed because it was poorly conceived, not because of bad luck. He worked steadily, his hands moving with practiced confidence, even as doubt crept into his mind. What if he was wrong? What if his approach didn't work? He'd be humiliated in front of hundreds of witnesses, and worse, he'd damage the reputations of the 3 women who'd trusted him. Senna watched from her seat, her hands clenched tightly. She could see what Jake was doing, and it terrified and excited her in equal measure. He wasn't just repairing the core. He was fixing its fundamental design flaws. If he succeeded, it would be a stunning achievement. If he failed, it would be a disaster. With 30 minutes remaining, Jake began the final assembly. His back ached from bending over the workstation, and his hands trembled slightly from fatigue and stress. The chamber had fallen quiet, everyone watching as he made the last connections. 15 minutes left. Jake double-checked everything, looking for any mistakes or loose connections. The core looked different now than when he'd started. The internal layout had changed, power flowing through new pathways he'd created. It should work. It had to work. 5 minutes remained. Jake straightened up, wiping sweat from his forehead. It's done. Vesa gestured to a technician. Test it. The technician approached cautiously, connecting diagnostic equipment to the core. He initiated the power-up sequence. For a long moment, nothing happened. Jake's heart sank. Had he miscalculated something? Made an error in the final assembly? Then the core hummed to life. The display panel lit up green. Power flowed smoothly through the pathways Jake had created. The technician's eyes widened as he read the data. High Arbiter, the technician said, his voice shaking slightly. The core is operational. Power output is stable at 95% of design specifications. No thermal irregularities detected. All safety systems functioning normally. Draven stood abruptly. That's impossible. We calculated that even if repairs were successful, the core would operate at no more than 70% efficiency due to the damage it sustained. Jake finally looked up at the council. It's at 95% because I fixed the design flaws that caused the failure in the first place. Your prototype had power distribution problems. The stress wasn't distributed evenly, which caused a single point to overload and fail. I rerouted the pathways to balance the load. It should actually be more stable now than when it was first built. The chamber exploded into conversation. Engineers were arguing with each other, some demanding to see Jake's work up close, others insisting the results must be wrong. Vesa raised her hand for silence, but it took several tries before order was restored. She looked at Jake with an expression he couldn't quite read. You have done what 3 of our best engineering teams could not. More than that, you have identified and corrected flaws in the original design that our engineers missed. How is this possible? Jake took a deep breath. Because I wasn't trying to fix it the Valyrian way. I was trying to fix it the right way. Your engineers are brilliant, but they're constrained by protocols and procedures. Sometimes you need to step back, look at the problem from a different angle, and be willing to do things that aren't in the manual. Vesa stood, and the entire chamber rose with her out of respect. She descended from her seat and approached Jake. I came here today prepared to dismiss you as an anomaly, a lucky human who had performed adequate repairs in desperate circumstances. I was wrong. Jake stood in the guest quarters assigned to him, staring out at the orbital city that surrounded Valyria Prime. 3 days had passed since his demonstration before the council, and his life had become a whirlwind of activity. Engineers requested meetings to learn his techniques. Companies offered consulting contracts with compensation that made his eyes water. The council itself had formally recognized him as a master engineer, a title rarely given to Valyrians and never before granted to a human. A chime at the door announced visitors. Jake found Lyria, Senna, and Kira standing together, dressed formally. Their expressions were serious in a way that made Jake nervous. We need to talk, Lyria said. May we come in? Jake gestured them inside, offering seats in the comfortable living area. He'd grown used to their company over the past weeks, and their formal demeanor now felt strange. Something important was happening. Lyria sat forward, her hands folded carefully. Jake, you've exceeded every expectation we had. What you did in the council chamber has started conversations throughout the consortium. Engineers are questioning old assumptions. The council is discussing new initiatives for interspecies cooperation. You've caused a shift in thinking that will echo for years. That's good, right? Jake asked, unsure where this was going. Senna nodded. It's very good. But it's also created a situation we need to address. You've received numerous offers for your services. Any of them would make you wealthy beyond your frontier station dreams. But before you accept any of them, we want to make you an offer of our own. Jake felt his stomach tighten with anticipation. What kind of offer? Kira leaned forward, her expression earnest. We want you to join our crew permanently, not as a consultant or contractor, but as a full member, our chief engineer and technical advisor. Jake blinked in surprise. But you have Senna, she's brilliant. I am the ship's engineer, Senna agreed. But what you've shown me goes beyond ship maintenance. You see problems differently, approach solutions from angles I would never consider. I want to learn from you, work with you. Together we could do things neither of us could accomplish alone. Lyria continued. But it's more than just a job offer. In Valyrian culture, crews who accomplish great things together often form permanent bonds. They become family units supporting each other both professionally and personally. It's one of our deepest traditions. Jake's throat felt tight. You're offering me a place in your family? Yes, Lyria said simply. These past weeks, you've become more than just someone who helped us. You've challenged us, taught us, and earned our respect. More than that, you've earned our affection. We want you with us, Jake. Not for a contract period or a specific mission, but as a permanent part of our crew and our lives. Jake stood, moving to the window to process what they were saying. He'd come to care for these three women deeply. They'd shown him kindness when they could have been dismissive. They'd trusted him when others doubted. They'd become his friends in a way few people ever had. I had a career once, Jake said quietly. I was a military engineer, worked on cutting-edge projects, had a promising future. But I couldn't stand the politics, the rigid thinking, the way innovation was crushed under bureaucracy. I walked away from all of it to be free on the frontier. Alone, but free, he turned to face them. These past weeks with you three, I've remembered what I gave up. Not the career or the prestige, but the collaboration. Working with people who understand what I do, who challenge me to be better. I've been lonely out there on my station, even though I told myself I preferred it. Kira's eyes were bright. Then stay with us. You won't be lonely, and you won't be constrained. We're not military or corporate. We're independent contractors who choose our own missions. You'll have freedom and family both. There's one condition, Jake said. My station on the frontier, I want to keep it. Turn it into something more. A proper workshop where humans and aliens can work together. A place that represents what we've started here. Senna's face lit up. That's perfect. I've already been thinking about the technical specifications. We could create a true cross-species engineering facility. Nothing like it exists anywhere. Lyria smiled, genuine warmth in her expression. We'll help you build it. The resources we've earned from this mission, combined with the contracts you've been offered, will be more than enough. Your frontier station will become something remarkable. Jake felt emotion welling up, unexpected and powerful. You really mean this? All of it? We do, Lyria said, standing and moving to face him. You gave us more than a repaired ship, Jake. You gave us a new perspective on the galaxy and our place in it. You've become important to us, and we don't want that to end. Senna joined her. I've learned more from you in these few weeks than I learned in years of formal training. I want to keep learning. I want us to push the boundaries of engineering together. Kira was last to stand, her smile bright and genuine. You make everything more interesting. Our mission is better with you as part of it. We're better with you as part of us. Jake looked at the three of them. These remarkable women who'd come into his life by accident and changed everything. He thought about his quiet station, the empty nights, the loneliness he'd convinced himself was freedom. Then he thought about the past weeks filled with conversation and collaboration and genuine connection. Yes, he said. I'll join you. I'll be part of your crew, your family. I want this. The three women smiled, and the formal tension that had filled the room dissolved. Kira laughed and pulled Jake into a hug, which seemed to surprise her as much as him. Valyrians weren't typically physically demonstrative, but somehow it felt right. Senna joined the embrace, then Lyria, and for a moment they stood together in a tangled group. Four people from different worlds united by respect and friendship and shared purpose. When they separated, Lyria was wiping her eyes. The council will be pleased. They've been hoping you'd stay in consortium space. Your presence here is already changing how people think about human capabilities. There will be challenges, Senna warned. Not everyone is happy about the changes you represent. Some engineers feel threatened. Some council members resist the idea of humans as equals. Jake shrugged. I've faced resistance before, but now I won't be facing it alone. Over the next week, plans took shape. Jake's station would be expanded into a major facility, funded by a combination of his consulting fees and grants from the consortium. The council, seeing the value in cross-species collaboration, had agreed to support the project as a pilot program. Engineers from multiple species would be invited to work there, sharing knowledge and techniques. Lyria secured new contracts for their crew, missions that would take them across the sector. Some involved diplomatic work, others technical consulting, all of them interesting and well-paid. Jake would split his time between traveling with the crew and developing the station, the best of both worlds. Senna spent hours with Jake designing the station upgrades. Her Valyrian technical knowledge combined with his practical experience created plans for a facility that would be truly unique. They argued over details, challenged each other's assumptions, and produced something better than either could have created alone. Kira took responsibility for planning their routes, finding missions that would allow them to stop at Jake's station regularly. She confessed she was excited about spending more time in human space, learning about Earth cultures and meeting other species who frequented the frontier regions. On their last night before departing Valyria Prime, the four of them stood together in the observation lounge of their ship. The orbital city glittered around them, and beyond it, the stars beckoned. "I've been thinking about what you said in the council chamber," Lyria said to Jake. "About looking at problems from different angles, doing things that aren't in the manual. That's not just about engineering, it's about life." Jake nodded. "I suppose it is. We've been following the manual for a long time," Kira said. "As a species, as individuals, maybe it's time we tried something different." Senna pulled up a holographic display showing their planned route. First stop is a mining colony experiencing equipment failures. They've asked for a Valyrian engineering team. They're going to get us instead a mixed crew with new ideas. "They might be surprised," Jake said with a smile. "Let them be surprised," Lyria replied. "Surprises can be good, as we've learned. After all, we didn't expect to find you when our ship broke down. That surprise became the best thing that could have happened to us." Jake felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. He'd set out thinking he was just fixing a broken drive, earning enough to pay his bills for a few months. Instead, he'd found purpose, partnership, and family among the stars. "Two unexpected rewards," Jake said, raising the glass of Valyrian beverage Kira had poured for them. The three women raised their glasses as well. "Two unexpected rewards," they echoed. As the ship prepared for departure, Jake took one last look at Valyria Prime. He'd arrived as an unknown human mechanic, dismissed and doubted. He was leaving as a recognized master engineer, a member of a crew that spanned species and cultures, with plans to build something that would bridge the gap between human and alien engineering. The quantum drive hummed to life, that perfect sound of his own repairs.